Welcome back to The Junkyard, a series dedicated to figuring out and rebuilding your favorite fictional mecha in mobile engagement chassis, Steel Hearts. We've got a classic, the grandfather of real robots, despite its huge size, bright primary colors, and the fact that the divide between super and real robots is tenuous at best. It's the original RX-78-2 Gundam. One of a tiny handful of prototypes built during the 1 Year War, it is used by Amuro Ray to just barely avoid getting hyper-murdered by each baddie of the week, and also to just absolutely ruin Shara's Nable's day, every day. This is arguably the most iconic mech of all time, and I've got a soft spot for the nuclear-powered fella. Grab your Omni Wrench and let's build it. Our design goals are simple. We've got to make a heavily armored Knight of Justice. Amuro spends the first half of the series getting his teeth kicked in, only saved by the Gundam being a few steps away from indestructible at the beginning. Mobile engagement chassis are also on average 15 meters, while the Gundam is about 18, so comparable but probably a little bulky. The Gundam is a whole army on its own, so we gotta get as many weapons as we can, and it's gotta be space worthy. Well, close as we can get anyway. The rules are simple. 1. We start with all 6 parts. This is a newly constructed Gundam ready to turn Zeon into space dust. 2. All parts from the mechanic shop are available. No fabled parts, and while crossover parts are available, I'll mostly avoid them. 3. 150,000 credit limit for upgrades. The Federation put a lot of cash in this, but it's still just one mobile suit, as expendable as you are. Now, step 1. We take the Knight 02, and we're done. Okay, but seriously, the Knight is already a Gundam. It's got the beam saber, the big shield, the bright color scheme, it's even got the big signature V on its forehead. It's very close, and if you want a Gundam flavored mech that's still its own thing, then the Knight is a seriously good pick. It's great. As a result, we're going to be taking a lot of parts from it for our Gundam build. In fact, it would be near impossible without it. We're also taking apart some Squires, the train mech that's good for beginners. The Squire may not be flashy, but it's really versatile and hits surprisingly hard in a pinch. These two alone are all we need, but we can go a step further and recycle a Cosmonaut in 1957, some sensors from the Trencher 1911, and maybe some parts from others. This thing's really flexible, you'll see what I mean soon. We'll be good mechanics and start with the option part first, and build around that. I'm picking the Heat Hatchet to be our beam saber. It scales off of durability or finesse, so we already know where to focus the rest of the parts on. It's also menacing in close quarters with multiple stratagems. Alternatively, you could pick the Knight's mech hammer to be our Gundam hammer. It doesn't matter which we pick, because we're going to be carrying a lot of weapons by the end of this. For our helmet, we're taking the Trencher's anti-air shoulders. These are our Vulcans, giving us anti-air capabilities. You could achieve a similar goal with the Knight's luminous beacon, giving you extra armor and soak, but losing the attacks. Instead, it inflicts status effects, probably a suppression fire in this case, while inspiring your allies, presumably by the Knight and Gundam's very distinct V shape. It's always a good thing to see a Gundam on your side. Lastly, we've got a ridiculous shield in our left hand with the Knight's titanium shield. This buffs up all our defenses and gives us a shield bash. Alternatively, you could take the Jouster's tower shield, since it sacrifices offense for even more defense. Considering how often the Gundam shield gets blown apart, I'm taking the softer shield to be thematic. But also, since Amuro has a dozen spares, you probably should invest in the same. One of them can be the tower, the other the titanium, swapped out as needed. We've got the main shape of the mech, now let's add all the fine details. Our core is coming from the Knight once again. This is important. The rest of the build hinges on the Knight core, and it's not hard to see why. +2 armor, +1 durability, and the ability to add an extra option slot. The Gundam has a bunch of hard points to mount extra weapons, making it super versatile, and we're no different. Remember how I said the option part doesn't matter? That's because we've got an extra one! You have a lot of options if you want to feel like a Gundam. The mech hammer is a based choice, obviously, but my favorite is the Falconer's magazine-fed bazooka as a good hyper bazooka analog, burning things in an AoE even without a stratagem. If you find yourself fighting space fascists instead of kaiju, then the explosive bowgun is basically your super napalm, though its default flavor is more like You learn the dreaded Geneva suggestion stratagem, which can't be held back and always kills the pilot if you shut down their mech with it. Finally, the survival shotgun is an excellent pick for a beam rifle, even boosting your soak and durability by 1 and getting both AoE and single target goodness. Our legs are next with the maneuver part. The Gundam has a heat-proof field or coating to help it not go up in a plutonium-flavored explosion upon atmospheric re-entry. It can also notably fly in space, though not leave Earth's atmosphere on its own. To achieve both of these, we're taking the thruster pack, giving us +1 durability for a heat field, and the ability to boost twice for free each phase. This pairs up really nicely with a heat hatchet that has a stratagem that powers up the more you boost. Finally, our right arm. Now, the Gundam's beam rifle is a devastating, comically powerful, scaled down mega particle cannon. It hits about as hard as a battleship, and is a one-hit KO against other mobile suits if it hits directly, at least at the time of its production. So you may think it's strange that I picked the Squire's tracer rifle to represent it. It doesn't even have stratagems! First, don't scoff at the tracer rifle. It's reliable damage and generates synergy every time you use it. Despite the beam rifle being actively overpowered, it doesn't normally do very much against skilled pilots, so here it's great to blast grunts with and build up synergy so you can do main character things against bosses. If you really don't like it though, the Gambler's lucky lever action rifle is a solid choice. Same range, uses any stat, and adds dice for every 6 you roll, meaning you're going to be hitting slightly harder on average. The crossover Advent's ray rifle is a really good pick, having infinite range and applying corroding by virtue of literally melting through enemy armor. The Advent is basically the Gundam of its universe, so many of its parts fit, but I'm personally gonna save that for some other Gundam build. My personal pick for an alternate arm though is the Knight's Beam Blade. It works pretty similar to the Heat Hatchet, losing some of its combo potential without thruster pack and mass damage, but gaining the ability to shock enemies and an extra intervention. We can use the survival shotgun as our beam rifle, with the other option either being the Gundam's second beam saber via the heat hatchet, or whatever other tool you like. This thing is a walking arsenal, but it means nothing without actually tuning it, so let's move to our upgrades. This thing's a tank and all our parts use durability, so that's getting near maxed out. You're literally nuclear powered, so we're gonna add 3 points to torque, activating grunt frame and heavy duty for a +9 to armor, and kinetic regen, gaining +1 synergy for every 5 points of damage you deal. Finally, the Gundam has a magnetic coating applied to its joints, reducing friction and increasing its turn speed. This translates pretty well to a mech speed upgrade, powering up our heat hatchet even further. Okay, so we're strong, but what are our actual stratagems? Our Vulcans give us access to knockout munitions, dealing honed damage and either dazing or sticking a huge 5x5 area. This is a pea shooter, but applying elements in such a wide area is awesome, and it generates synergy if it's used against flying enemies. As an intervention, you can negate damage that either you or your allies are going to take via landmines, or I guess grenades in this case. The Heat Hatchet has a bunch of stratagems. Blaze Rush has a range of our speed +2, so that speed upgrade helps it out. You rush towards a target and deal blaze damage, each doubling the dice adding +1 damage. This gets real nasty with diving in, which adds an extra die for each time you boosted this phase. Remember how our thrusters give us 2 free boosts? And how using the tracer rifle builds up synergy? And kinetic regen that's given us even more? The point is, if you're gonna use your beam saber, you should always be boosting before diving in for the kill, so you can chuck a whole fistful of extra dice at people. This stratagem hurts, and is basically guaranteed to tear a grunt in half with 1 hit. Very lore accurate. You also learn Blaze Cleave, targeting 3 enemies by your side and applying burning to them. If you're lucky and roll 4 of the same number, you add an extra 5 direct damage, non-negotiable. Alternatively, you can use Mass Quake, doing damage in line 6 and applying stuck. That could be the Beam Javelin, but I like to imagine this as a Zeta Gundam Beam Confuse. Now for our choices for our additional option parts. If your soul is weighed down by the overwhelming gravity of the Gundam Hammer, then you have the Righteous Slam, dealing damage and applying charge at range 3. Once you've gotten a bit more battle bond though, you might want to break away from your chains and pick up a Hyper Bazooka. The magazine-fed bazooka teaches the ridiculous Charring Blast, immediately giving you 3 free boosts, adding 3 damage for each quad, and thanks to its ace pilot chance, potentially adding even more dice and giving you 4 synergy. Finally, our shield gives a Shield Bash, which does exactly what it says in the tin. Deals damage, applies dazed, and bumps up your shield per 2 dice used. If someone is about to ruin you or your allies' daze, you can parry this via time deflection, negating a point of damage for each hit, and sending 2 direct damage back at your enemies for each triple on the dice. Alright, what do we got? Stat-wise, this thing is a min-maxed monster, with 8 durability, and we can still max out to 9 by either carrying the survival shotgun, or by taking our final upgrade later. Our torque isn't fucking around either, at a respectable 6. The rest of our stats stay at 1. You're slow, your parts are a little outdated, and while your supercomputer is constantly recording and learning from combat data, it needs a lot of it before it can even do anything with that. That elusive aim assist is still far off. Our shield max is pretty good at 11. You literally have a shield. That makes sense. Our soak is 1, which is fine I guess, and our armor is a ridiculous 25. You are the tank of your party. Our speed is 6, which isn't great, but we're making up for it a bit thanks to our thruster pack. So pros and cons. On the one hand, this thing is nearly invincible, being able to tank and negate any kind of damage thanks to high shields, high integrity, and defensive options from your shield and Vulcans. It's also a walking arsenal, with extra slots that can be swapped in and out without compromising the whole build, and has a big flashy finishing move via a dive-in Blaze Rush. The rest of your stratagems are pretty strong too. While a dedicated DPS will outdamage you real quick, you can just about keep up if you push yourself. For the cons, you're pretty slow, and your elements are limited to fire if you're not careful about your secondary option. Your range also isn't great, so snipers and weird space psychics will cause problems. It's also really synergy hungry, which you can kinda counteract with the beam rifle, but you really don't want to be using that thing against the Red Comet himself. With that, the Gundam is complete. Well, almost complete. The only thing it's missing is you, its pilot. Now fly off, beyond time itself. Contemplate human potential and the great and terrible things it brings. And in this brave new world filled with worms and giants, maybe, just maybe, we might finally understand each other.
You can change your destiny beyond space and time. You can change your future if you trust you and I. We can share the happiness that we